This God who is able to turn things around, even in your own life today, this God of miracles is able to touch you where it hurts the most. He's able to touch you where you have given up, where you thought nothing else can help me. This God is able to help you there. And that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about refresh, restart. It's a time to refresh. It's a time to restart. I don't know if you've been in that place where your computer is stuck. You know, it's a new computer, whatever. It's a good computer, but it's stuck right now, and you can't move forward. Nothing is happening. What do you need to do at that time? Well, maybe it's time to refresh. Maybe it's time to restart the computers, and they got really smart these days with them. If you restart the computer, it doesn't lose the files. It still saves them for you. I don't know if you've ever been there in your life when you thought it's over, when you thought there's nothing else that I can do. I don't know which way to go forward or go backwards. I don't know which way to go. And you feel like, what should I do? Is it all over? Or can I restart? Can I refresh? Can I do something different at this point without losing everything? In our spiritual lives, sometimes we need to do that refresh. Sometimes we need to restart. Restart, not necessarily restarting at the beginning, but restarting at the end, so to say. Restart from where you are and move forward. Refresh. Restart. Jumpstart your life again. Your spiritual life. Your love for Jesus Christ. Restart. Refresh. See, Jesus has risen from the dead. We know that. He got out of a sealed tomb, leaving his grave cloths behind. I mean, how he wriggled out, how he got out of those grave cloths, we don't know. Only God can tell. But he did. He got out of a heavily secured tomb. How he did all that, only God knows. What we do know, and it's confirmed by recorded history, is that once that tomb was occupied by the dead body of Jesus Christ, and after 3 days, it was no longer occupied. And he left the grave cloths behind because he's never going to need them again. He's never going to need those again. So he left them behind. And someone would say in Lazarus' own case, he still came up with his grave clothes because he would need them again. And I don't know that that's the intention of the scriptures, but that's kind of what happened. It sounds good that Lazarus came up with his own grave clothes and Jesus left his behind, saying, I'm not going to need that anymore. On the third day, he got out of that empty tomb, and this formerly dead person is now walking around, appearing to his disciples and his followers. He's appearing to them while the authorities are scrambling around and trying to find ways to kind of, cover up this very troubling, this inexplicable truth about the resurrection. It's like, where is the body? Some of them were asking at the beginning, and only to realize that it's not a body. He is a living Lord. He's a living being that's walking around physically, showing himself, manifesting himself to his people. He's shown himself to Mary Magdalene first, and then showed himself to the disciples, excluding Thomas. And later on, he reappears to the disciples, including Thomas the skeptic. He's come back. He's shown himself to them. And each time he came in, he's greeted them with shalom, peace be unto you. And he has breathed upon them the Holy Spirit. He says, giving them the capacity to receive the Holy Spirit. He's empowered them, and I don't fully understand it. He's empowered them to even forgive sins. Anyone whose sins you forgive is forgiven. Anyone from whom you withhold forgiveness will not be forgiven. I don't fully understand that. And some people will say it's just, by preaching the gospel, they're basically giving people the chance to be forgiven or not to be forgiven. But his infrequent appearances, they just seem to be insufficient for the disciples. It's just not working for them. It's not enough to engage them. It's not enough to sustain them during this time. He appears one time and then the next time he appeared was 8 days later. That's like, these are people who are used to being with him all the time. All of a sudden, they see him only intermittently, and it's not sustaining them the way he had done it prior to his crucifixion. And here the apostles, they don't know what to do. These disciples, these people, helpless, they have no idea what to do. How are we going to live our lives in his absence? What are we going to do now that he's no longer here with us? They did not have it in them to carry on the ministry of the Lord in his absence. They did not have it in them at all to do any of that, even though Jesus had made promises to them, told them what they would need to do in the future, but they just didn't have it. They're like, where do we go? Should we return to our former way of life, or should we, what do? We don't have any. There are no options. The person that we came to follow is no longer here. He just comes occasionally and greets us with peace be unto you, and we don't know what to do with it. Yes, being with Jesus these almost 3 years, more than 3 years, has actually destabilized their lives, destabilized their vocations, and they don't know what to do. Well, you can trust Peter for not just wanting to sit around. not wanting to just sit around and like be in kind of limbo. Gotta do something. So some of these disciples, led by Peter, they attempt to return to the one thing that they know apart from following Jesus. Simon Peter, Thomas, called the twin or Didymus, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, John and James and John, and the two other disciples, they were together. They were still, we don't know where the other, 4 went, but we know that these guys are here. And Simon Peter said to them, I'm going fishing. Seriously, Peter? Peter is a leader. And as goes the leader, so goes the rest of them. Peter says, I'm going fishing. Peter, you can't do that. You are the leader. Once you go fishing, what do you want these guys to do? But Peter doesn't know what to do either, because the master himself is not here. And Peter can't just, sit around and do nothing. No, he can't do that. He says, I'm going fishing. I don't know if he thought about it or it just came up in his usual impulsive way, but he says, I'm going fishing. Well, what do you think? The rest of them says, we're going with you. If you're the leader, if you're going fishing, if that's going to be the new thing to do, we're going right with you, because we know you're a great fisherman. We remember how it used to be in the beginning. So we're going to go fishing with you. They went out, got on the boat, but that night, they caught nothing. That's kind of disappointing. Remember that the Lord had called them and trained them to be fishers of men. These were great fishermen, at least 3 of them, Peter, James, and John. They were great fishermen at first. That's where the Lord met them. But this training that they had for 3 years now with the Lord didn't seem to be enough for them, did not seem to be enough for them, while the Lord is now basically consistently absent. Not consistently absent, but at least not as present as he used to be. But it's not working the way it worked for them when God, Jesus Christ, was consistently present with them. What they need right now, is some kind of an eternal purpose and the capacity to act independently in the absence of Jesus. They just didn't have that. But it just seems like this kind of detour to the former life their former vocation, it seems to be in conflict with the new calling that Jesus has on their lives. Even though it seems like nothing is happening, but their attempt to go back to this is like in conflict with the calling that Jesus has on their lives to be fishers of men. So it seems to me that that's why they caught nothing all night. Now, it's not the first time, but that's why it seems to me that they caught nothing. Despite their experience, despite their expertise, they caught no fish that night. Catching fish on their own. If they caught fish, a lot of fish that night, that would probably have kind of shifted their attention from what the Lord had called them to do. So I believe that it was the Lord that didn't let them catch fish on their own. And obviously disappointed now, they're like, okay, the master is not here, we can't catch men. Even the stuff we really know how to do, we couldn't even do, we couldn't catch fish. I'm thinking they're feeling disappointed. They're feeling, totally, it's like wondering, now what? Now what are we going to do? We can't go forward, we can't go backward. Now what are we going to do? Well, at this point of this kind of questioning in their minds, I'm conjecturing here, they hear this curious voice of a stranger at the shore. Children, do you have fish? It's not quite daybreak. Your day was about breaking, so it's not bright enough for them to exactly know who it was out there. And I believe that the reference to them as children, it's like it helped to disguise the identity of this person, this caller on the shore. Because you know what? The Lord Jesus never, maybe I shouldn't say never, but it's not usual that he referred to them as children. So here they don't quite know who it is, but they're trusting enough to respond to this guy. Says Jesus said to them, to us it's Jesus, but to them he was a stranger. Children, do you have any fish? And they answered him, no. So trusted this person that didn't know and said, no, we haven't caught any fish. Well, the stranger is daring enough to tell them what to do. And they're going to respond to that. Just trusting enough. And this stranger directs them. Hey, cast the net on the right side. It's like, who is this stranger? They didn't ask that, but I'm sure somebody was wondering. Cast the net on the right side of the boat and you'll find some. Really? And they didn't ask. Trustingly, they responded. And so they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. They're expert fishermen. They could tell. When they start, pulling the net, they know there's something. It's either rock or, but it's got to be fish. They know. From the flopping and whatever, down there, they could tell that is fish. They couldn't haul it in. It's a whole bunch of fish. They didn't know how much, how many. Listen to this stranger. They did it trustingly. They cast their net without questions. This is kind of like a big throwback for them. Their beginning experience as we read in Luke chapter 5, 1 to 11. Jesus met them. Same place, same kind of situation. He borrowed Peter's boat and had a seaside evangelistic campaign there by the sea, on the lake of Gennesaret. And after doing that, he told them to cast their net. You say, Master, we toiled all night and we caught nothing. But because you said so, we're going to throw our net in. And they drew such a large fish. And they responded in amazement. And Jesus' response to them, looking at them at a time, was, hey, don't be too amazed yet. Because from now, you're going to be catching men, not fish. Such an unconscionable amount of fish, a number of fish that they caught. At that time, they gave an excuse why they hey, we've been working all night. We really don't want to cast any more net. We just want to go home. But Jesus says, do it anyway. And they said, because you said so, we're going to do it. I believe it's because they've heard his word. This is a different kind of rabbi, and they cast their net anyway. But this time around, they offered no excuses. They offered no explanation. But they just obeyed the stranger. And what followed was a miraculous catch of fish, like a reenactment of their initial experience. That's what followed here. They made such a large catch here that, that recalled to them the way it was at the beginning. And John does something here. You can trust John for being the first to notice. As soon as John saw that, this is massive, he yelled out, "It's the Lord." The disciple whom Jesus loved therefore said to Peter, "It is the Lord." How did he know that? He saw the miracle. This doesn't happen every day. We've been here working all night. We've been toiling all night, doing everything. From our experience, we've done everything that we need. We know how to do, and we caught nothing. And all of a sudden, we caught such large fish, and we can tell by pulling the net, it must be the Lord. It is the Lord. And he gave up everything. As soon as he says, "It's the Lord," yes, Peter is not the first person to tell it is the Lord. But you can trust Peter to take the first step. He left. He was stripped for work. And as soon as Peter heard it is the Lord, got his garments, put them together, bam, fell into the water, dive into the water. Swimming towards the Lord. Swimming towards this person they thought was a stranger, but no stranger at all. This person that has given them such a great catch. But it's not a coincidental thing at all. This is no ordinary catch. It is a miracle of the Lord. And he's not a stranger. He is the risen Lord, manifesting himself to them again. And Peter swam towards the Lord. He didn't hesitate at all to leave everything behind. Peter did not hesitate. He left everything, going towards the Lord. The disciple whom Jesus loved therefore said to Peter, "It's the Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and he threw himself into the sea. He didn't care, with abandon. He went towards the Lord. You think about what's going on here. You go back to the beginning where we read before, where I referred to before in the book of Luke. When Peter saw the great catch of fish at the beginning, what did he do? Peter fell down to Jesus and said, depart from me, for I am a sinner, O Lord." He said, "Jesus, go away from me, I am a sinner." But now, when he sees Jesus, when he realizes that it's the Lord, he didn't run away from him. He swam towards the Lord, towards Jesus. Peter might not be the first to realize it. He might not be the first to tell it is the Lord, but Peter, he will go to work. He will go to work right away with all his passion once he sees something to believe in. Once he sees something worth working for, Peter is ready to go. And here Peter leaves fish, boat, associates, and all, and swam towards the Lord. That's how our response to the Lord should be, that we can leave everything behind and go towards Him. And that's Peter. Hasn't lost his passion one bit. It's very childlike attraction, very childlike attachment to the Lord. Despite everything that has happened, Peter says, you know what? If it's the Lord, I'm going. Remember Peter? Lord, if it is you, tell me to come. And the Lord says, it is I. And Peter starts walking on water. You got to trust Peter to do that. All the crazy things that Peter will do, when it is the Lord, Peter is going. It's a good thing about him. Might have been discredited for denying his Lord at a critical juncture, but Peter did not quit at all. He stuck around with the other disciples. He didn't leave. He stayed around. Yes, once Peter was ashamed of identifying with the Lord, but not anymore. Quite unlike Judas. Judas sinned against the Lord, but he thought it was all over. You can't remedy the situation. It's a terminal error right here. This is a tragic error, terminal error. Therefore, it's all over. And he went out and committed suicide. Irreparable, he thought. But Peter did something bad too. He denied his master, but he stayed around. Because he stayed around, Peter was a reference point when Mary and the ladies went to the grave and saw that the tomb was empty. They went to report to Peter and the other disciples. And Peter was there, one of those that ran to the tomb to check it out. And Peter was around each time the Lord revealed himself to them. And Peter is around now to witness, to experience this. Have this front row witness experience of what's playing out, this renewal, this refresh, this restart in the life of the disciples, but especially in the life of Peter. You got to stick around. Doesn't matter what's happening to you, doesn't matter what's going in your life, you got to stick around. Don't ever try to be isolated, because isolation, Peter knows that already. He's experienced that isolation is the devil's ploy to destroy. He gets you isolated when he wants to destroy you. So Peter stays around with the disciples. Even though he's messed up, he didn't leave. He was going to witness. He's now witnessing this renewal, this restoration. You know, the Lord doesn't expect perfection, at least not in this life. He's not expecting perfection from his children. He doesn't do that. But he always seeks our dependence on him. He doesn't expect us to be perfect in our experience, in our behavior, in everything we say, in everything we think. No. He knows, and he has made a way out for us when we mess up. He wants us to repent. He wants us to depend on him. God will always work with a repentant sinner, but he will have nothing to do with a self-righteous person who thinks he's got to be perfect at all times. God doesn't want anything to do with a self-righteous perfectionist, but he wants to work with a repentant sinner. People who realize that I messed up. That's nothing that I can do, Lord. I come back to you just as I am, to be cleansed and to be used again. See here, the Lord didn't chide these guys. He didn't say, man, he didn't reprove them. Man, why do you guys go fishing? Now I know how much you love me. He didn't do that. He did not do that at all. He taught them some important lessons about his call upon their lives. That's what he did here. He could prosper their fishing business if he chose to do that. But he had called them to something greater. He had called them to be fishers of men. It's part of the lesson they're going to learn here. And he would always provide for them. He would always provide for them. All they needed to do was, to just stay with him, to depend on him. Even when it seems like he's absent, they needed to stick around. They didn't need to go fishing to stay sustained. They didn't need to go back to fishing in order to be fed. to get a meal. No, they did not need that because the Lord would always provide for them. You know, he had enough fish. Even if they don't know where it came from, he had enough fish for them. He wanted them to focus on fishing for men instead of fishing for fish. So God, the Lord Jesus here, didn't only perform the miracle of them catching a whole bunch of fish. He also performed another miracle. Having this fish on fire. Having bread on the fire for them, and they didn't know where it came from. Because when the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, they weren't too far away from land, about 100 yards off. When they got out on land, they saw a charcoal fire in place. Jesus already made fire. They saw there with fish laid on it. And I know it's not one. If it's one fish, then it was a very massive one. They saw fish on it and bread. And Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish that you have just caught. I'm not trying to condemn you all for just catching fish. We're going to use some of your fish. But I want you to know that before you caught your fish, I already had fish here waiting for you. He didn't condemn them. But he showed them that they didn't need to toil all night to sustain themselves. And that's a lesson that all of us need. That the different vocations we're involved in, God doesn't really need those to sustain us. God doesn't need us doing all of that. But he wants us, he allows us to do it. But he doesn't need that to sustain us. What we got to do is to put our attention on him, to depend on him and know that he's able to provide for us in any circumstance, in his miraculous way. He does not depend, he doesn't depend on our fishing or whatever we do to sustain us. He uses it, but he doesn't depend on that. He's able to provide for us consistently in his miraculous way. And by the way, there are people out there who are in full-time ministry for the Lord today. God is saying, you don't need all the other stuff. It's not a bad thing, but I have called you into this ministry to do this for me. Therefore, know that I will be able to provide for you. You don't need to do any of that. While it's not bad, but I can provide for you. Jesus had fish waiting for them to show them that our personal efforts will accomplish nothing unless the Lord is with us, unless we work according to his directions. That's why they caught the fish in the first place. He didn't want them to do that independently. He allowed them to catch fish to show that, hey, you're going to need me. You're always going to need me. And I will give you a direction. Well, the question, when you go back to the catching of the fish, did Jesus just know where the fish was? Did he know exactly where the fish was? And the disciples didn't know where it was all night? Did he just know, or did he create the fish and put them in that place right there, and when he needed the fish there for them? These guys are experts. They know where to find fish. They fished all night. It didn't work. But when Jesus told them, right there, on the right side of the boat, they caught a whole bunch of fish to show Jesus is the Lord. He is God. He's the creator. He created fish. He created the sea. He knows where the fish is for you. All you and I need in life is just to listen and to obey. If we listen to him and obey him, he's going to take us to where there is supply. He's going to take us to where there is fish. It is a miracle. It is a miracle of the Lord. He gave them the wisdom and the direction to catch fish. And he provided for them, even without them catching fish. And then we go to the other aspect of this message this morning. Question. How much do you love me? The Lord is saying. How much? How much do you love me? He's gotten Peter's attention now. He moves to the point, hey, Peter, I get it. I can see something in you. I see it. Now the Lord moves on, because there's something underneath that the Lord needs to fix, something beneath the surface. Sometimes we do some things up there. People see what we do, yet there is something deep inside of us that needs to be fixed, the thing that's beneath the surface. Jesus needed to fix that, just as he needs to fix some things in your life, because what we see is only just a tip of the iceberg. The real business is down there. He's going to restore Peter. He's going to recommission him. Yes, Peter has sinned against the Lord, and he needed this reassurance from the Lord that all is okay. I'm not holding any grudge against you, Peter, but I want to know what you think about me. He's going to trust. Peter needed this reassurance that the Lord still trusts him and is ready to engage him for service. It is possible that Peter had, all along, even though he's been doing all of this, he's still being weighed down by his disloyalty towards his master. It's possible that deep down Peter feels really bad, and therefore he is not as free as he should be. He's coming along. But the Lord saw value in Peter. Peter may not have seen much value in himself. He might be doing too much right now, whatever, but the Lord sees something deep down in the heart of Peter. Perhaps he was thinking that the Lord had lost confidence in him, but God is saying, look, I still see something in you. Perhaps he was thinking that the Lord couldn't use him anymore, but the Lord looks beyond our overt actions and sees our hearts. He's still loyal to the Lord, obviously, as we can see, though he didn't know how to express it, going fishing. He may have given up on himself somehow. It's possible, as far as the calling upon his life went. But he was still loyal. Somehow, deep down, there was still something in him. The Lord hadn't given up on him at all. He still certainly saw great value in Peter. Just as he sees a great value in you, no matter what may have happened in your life, no matter what you may have said or done or whatever, the Lord still sees a great value in you, and he can still use you. But before he does that, he wants to do some cleansing. He wants to give you some assurance here. Peter obviously was still a great leader. He was still very influential, and influential enough to lead the crew to go fishing during this time. God has called and invested so much in Peter as he has invested in you, and he's not about to give up on Peter, just as he's not about to give up on you. And it's not very much about whether the Lord loves you or not. He's going to find out whether you still love him. Yes, obviously there's been a major shortfall in Peter's life, but God still loves him, values him anyway. God, who places a lot of value above on our hearts beyond our actions. So he asked Peter these questions. Peter, I want to know about your love. You don't have to worry about whether I love you or not, Peter. Just as the Lord is saying to you today, you don't have to worry about whether I love you or not. That's a done deal. I love you forever. You have my eternal love. But the question is, do you love me? Do you love me? He didn't pressure Peter. He did not command Peter, Peter, you got to love me, man. Come on, I've been with you for 3 years. No, that's not the approach. He wants to elicit that from Peter voluntarily. Peter, do you love me? He asked questions. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? More than these? Some people say more than these will be referring to, Peter, do you love me more than these fish? Basically, Peter, do you love me more than your profession? He doesn't say that. We don't know exactly. Or maybe they say, Peter, do you love me more than these men here love me? These other 6. Do you love me more than they love me? Because you're the leader. Do you love me? You're going to be their leader. Do you love me more than you love them? because you're going to be totally loyal to me. Your loyalty is primarily to me. 3 ways of looking at that. We don't know exactly which one. But the question comes down to Peter, Simon, do you love me? Simon, son of John. You know, when you look at that, we know it says, he said to Simon Peter, but he calls him Simon. Peter means rock and gives the impression of stability. But the Lord doesn't call him Peter here. He calls him Simon. Simon meaning listen, hear me. Are you listening? Can you hear me? Do you love me more than these? Well, 3 times the Lord asked this question. The first time Peter said, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And Jesus commanded him, feed my lambs. There's a lot to say here. There's a lot to say here. So basically, 3 times the Lord is asking him this question to elicit from Peter this affirmation of his love for the Lord. Perhaps one for each time that Peter denied him. And in this context here, and I know you've heard this before, 2 words for love are used in this context. The Lord uses the same word, the agape word. He uses that for the first 2 questions. This selfless, gracious love. Peter, do you love me selflessly? Peter, do you love me because of who I am? But Peter uses a different word all 3 times. Peter says, I love you. Both of us, I love you as a friend. I love you as a brother. I love you because we have common interests. Friendship. That's what that phileo means. Phileo is the love that is, is attached to something. It's based on our common interests. It's based on our relationship. It's based on us being family. But Jesus is asking, do you love me? This kind of love, this is the love that God has for people. This is the love that people should have for God. Do you love me at that level? But Peter, although some people will they say that's not the intention, but it seems quite clear here that Peter uses a different word each time that Jesus asks the question. It's a different word. And we know that the love that Jesus is asking for is the highest, purest form of love. And Peter says, I'm not quite there. I have this level of love for you. I'm not quite there. This is where I am. And the Lord Jesus pushes on and continues to ask the question. And when he realizes that Peter is not where he expects him to be, comes down to where Peter is. He said to him the 3rd time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And what the Lord is doing here is using Peter's words. Okay, Peter, let's come down to where you are. Do you really love me as a brother? Do you really love me as a friend? Do you really love me? Do we have a common interest here? Do we have a relationship? Are we families? What Jesus is saying. Peter, I know you haven't quite come up to where I expect you to be, but I'm going to come down to where you are. See, the love that Jesus was talking about is a love that, he says, I find pleasure in you. I find my joy in you. That's what agape means. And Peter says, I am satisfied with you. Jesus says the selfless love that seeks my interest, my best interest, that pursues my best interest. That's what I want you. But Peter says, I love you as a brother. And it's important for Peter that he did this I mean, the Lord is not going to discard Peter for not being where he wants him to be. That's why he came down to where Peter is. He's not discarding him for not being exactly where he wants him to be at that time. Hey, come along anyway. I'm going to take you to where I need you to be. And that's what he does for us. He's not going to discard us for not being where he wants us to be at first. No, he just wants us to come along. Eventually, he will lead us to where we need to be. We will kind of grow on him. And it was important for Peter to say the truth here because you know what? He knew that Jesus knew the truth about him. Jesus knew whether he loved him or not, or how much he loved him. And he plays on the word no here. It was important for him to be truthful about it. There's nothing to hide. In his first two responses, Peter uses the word no. It's like kind of intuitive knowledge. You know. You know. You can tell. You can see. I know you can feel it. You know deep inside that I love you. You know it. He said that 2 times. You can perceive. From my outward behavior, you can perceive from the way that I'm behaving, you can see, especially, you can see that I love you. You can understand that I love you, Peter is saying. But then, when Jesus asked him the question the 3rd time, in verse 17, Peter uses a different word for no. He says, Lord, you know from practical experience. You know from working with me. I mean, it's like I'm paraphrasing. Forget about what happened in the last few days. You know, for all these 3 years that we walked together, you know that I love you. He's grieved that Jesus asked him the question there. And I want to say to us in closing today, the Lord isn't asking you to be perfect. He's not asking for perfection from you at all. No. And he's not saying, I'm going to use you only if you're perfect, if you're exactly how I want you to be right on day one. No, that's not what he's saying. It doesn't even matter what day you came along. It doesn't even matter how long you've been in the Lord. The Lord is ready to use you at any time. All he wants from you is, do you love me? Do you love me like a child? I know you've made mistakes. I know your hands are kind of dirty, but you still love me like a child enough to run to me and give me a hug despite. Are you so conscious of what bad thing you've done that you no longer love me? That's not what he's asking for. He's not asking for perfection. Because he knows that if love is present, then the behavior is going to follow naturally. You're going to grow into it. Even if you and I have made mistakes, even if you have made a mistake, and although you have made mistakes, the important question is whether or how much you love. Do you love the Lord? Because you know what? Love carries with it the sense of freedom, the freedom to be yourself, the freedom to even make mistakes. That's why the Lord is emphasizing love. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter where I am. We don't have to worry about God's love for us. All we've got to be concerned about is whether we love him. If we love him, his arms are always open to welcome us. Yes, Peter thought maybe that he had lost it. The Lord had no need for him anymore, but God entrusts him with his most valuable commodity, so to say. Feed my lambs. Take care of my lambs. Lambs need food. Feed them. And even when they grow to have a mind of their own, to do whatever, I want you to tend my sheep. Lead them. Guide them. Provide them direction. Follow my example. Feed them. Tend them. God is ready to grant you enormous responsibilities just because you love him, not because you're perfect, not because of perfection. Your expression of love is what he's looking for And if you love the Lord, it says, I'll come to you. If you love me, my Father and I will come and we'll make our abode. We're going to make our home with you. And when we come in, we're going to lead you to where you're supposed to be. Because Peter, I know you don't love me as much as I'm talking about here, but eventually you will. And you will sacrifice yourself for me, even though you have not been able to do it now. So, question. Do you and I need to refresh? Do we need to hit the refresh, the restart button? Do we need to do that? If we're willing to do that, whatever has happened, the Lord is always ready. His arms are wide open, waiting for us to return. And He'll fix us up. He'll cleanse us. And He will commission us with power for a great responsibility ahead. But you can be sure of this, that God's call upon your life is not over. The Lord is not about to give up on you. So if you're feeling that you've kind of given up on yourself, no, not the Lord. He's not giving up on you, because the call of God upon your life is irrevocable. He wants to bless you, and He wants to make you a blessing. So today, question. You can put your name in there. Do you love me? Do you love me more than whatever it is? If you do, my love is for you already.